Hi, I'm Charles Clinton,
And I'm Andre Miller.
and this is Opinions Are Light, the show where we give our top fives and then we debate.
And that we will debate. What did you think about the 2013 season?
The 2013 NFL season was amazing. We had a lot of great, exciting games. We had a lot of teams that did very well, and then there were teams that did well and then completely blew it, and I think you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yes, I do. That's why a lot of your head coaching jobs were gone. They had
Yes.
to hire new coaches. And,
Well, to be very specific, we had the Detroit Lions, who did not do a very good job at the end of the season when they had the lead in the NFC North, and now they've got a new head coach as a result.
yes, and I think they should have done that last year in 2012. But you know, I'm not the general manager, nor am I an owner of the Detroit Lions. So
Yeah.
it's what it is.
I think that was something that they could have done a better job of beforehand as well, but it's possible. What we are going to do today is our top 5 NFL quarterbacks of all time. Why don't we start off with our honorable mentions?
All right, I'll start it off. My number one honorable mention is Warren Moon. Warren Moon does not get enough credit for what he did do while he was in the NFL. You know, he played CFL for a long period of time and, you know, broke a lot of records. And the thing is, you know, he's not the stereotypical black quarterback, and I don't want to say that, but I mean, gotta mean what I say.
Yeah.
He could throw. I mean, he was a thrower. You know, he stayed in the pocket and threw. He didn't really run. He was athletic and could run, but he didn't do it like that. So he's a different type of black quarterback, even in the 80s. My second one was Fran Tarkenton. Okay, and I know you probably don't like that, but that's okay. That's okay. I thought Fran Tarkenton was like one of the first, you know, running quarterbacks, getting out of trouble, getting out of danger, and had a heck of an arm too. So he's my second honorable mention. And last but not least, Brett Favre Beans. That's my third one. That's my third one. Brett has a lot of heart. A lot of heart. He has a cannon too. Shotgun, really. He made plays. He won, what, 2 MVPs? Was it 2 or 1 MVP?
I think he might have done 2. It was 2
Yes,
MVPs.
He made Green Bay of the early 90s what they are till today, really. You know, I know Aaron Rodgers has it now, but Brett Favre, he did his thing. So he's my number 3. Now, what about you? What's your honorable mention?
My honorable mentions is Warren Moon as well. That's my number 1 pick. Warren Moon was a great quarterback, not just in the CFL, but in the NFL as well. The teams that he was with did not have great defenses. He had good receivers like Chris Carter and Haywood Jeffries, but I would say that on the whole, he did not have the teams that you need to win a Super Bowl. But that being said, being a starting quarterback for almost 20 years like he was, that ranks at the very least an honorable mention.
Run and shoot. Don't forget that.
Yes,
that offense
more
that they ran.
run and shoot offense. Now, for me, my second honorable mention is Brett Favre, which is on yours as well. He doesn't make it into my top 5 because he made a lot of mistakes, but the records he set and the consecutive games that he played, that warrants a lot. And also, he made Green Bay into just a dominant team in the NFC Central and later the NFC North. And my number 3 is Roger Staubach. Now, this is a pick I was kind of on the fence about because I hate the Dallas Cowboys. But the thing about it is this. I cannot ignore the fact that Roger Staubach, Roger the Dodger, he could make things happen when there was nothing there. He could get around in the pocket. He could scramble. He could run for a first down. He could run for a touchdown. Yeah. And on top of that, he just seemed to make things happen when it seemed like the Cowboys were going to lose. Right. More than anything else, he had that ability, and that's why I believe that he's an honorable mention at least.
I think also with Roger Staubach, he fit the image of that team, just like the coach did. You know, they were the same. They kind of had the same persona in a sense to me.
Which is odd because they did not get along.
Yeah, I read about that. But you know, they were about business though. You know, they were professional athletes, and that's why I do give Roger Staubach credit.
Yeah, he was not Tom Landry's ideal quarterback,
right?
But he wound up being the quarterback that he needed to win the Super Bowl.
You are correct. You are correct. So I'm going to let you start off with your top 5 because I know this is not the real top 5. You saved the best for last.
Oh. Well, I'm going to show you what I've got in store for you. All right, my number 5 quarterback is Steve Young. Now, Steve Young, he stepped into probably the worst possible situation where you could become a starting quarterback, where at first he was at Tampa Bay, which was the worst team in the league at the time, and then he wound up being the backup to Joe Montana in San Francisco. Now, when he finally took over, he was taking over for a quarterback who'd already won 4 Super Bowls. But he was the guy who extended that dynasty and got them a 5th. And on top of that, he did it in a way that was completely different to Joe Montana. He's a left-handed quarterback. He ran around, he scrambled outside the pocket, and he made plays. And he also didn't have the same team that Joe Montana did. He didn't have Roger Craig. He didn't have that great offensive line. He did have Jerry Rice, but
yeah, that's
they needed
and Ricky Waters.
He needed some great play. he did some great things with nowhere near the talent that Joe Montana had around him. I'm not going to knock Joe Montana at all, but I think Steve Young deserves to be in the top 5 because he was able to step into an incredible situation.
I disagree. Now, my thing is, how can you have a second-string quarterback as one of your top 5 quarterbacks of all time? That just sounds...
I also have to give props to San Francisco for the system that they had and the way that they were able to adapt to Young and just be able to...
San Fran, I don't not to cut you off, but San Fran is lucky that free agency wasn't the way it is today, because I think Steve Young would have been out of there real quick.
Yeah, but Steve Young, he wanted to stay. He wanted to stay and prove it himself, and that was one of the reasons why I put him there, because he did prove himself and won the Super Bowl.
Okay, all right.
Now my number 4 quarterback is actually Joe Montana. And Joe Montana won 4 Super Bowls with one of the first offenses to really emphasize the pass and really emphasize the passing game. Now, Terry Bradshaw won 4 Super Bowls with the Steelers, but they were a run-first team.
Right.
Now, Joe Montana, the interesting thing was they were a pass-first team, but he didn't have the greatest arm in the NFL at the time.
Okay, I agree with you.
But he could pick you apart with his intelligence. He could see the field. He could read the short passing game and the slants and the crossing routes. And he was able to use Bill Walsh's offense and just pick apart defenses with that. And that's how they were able to win 4 Super Bowls. Correct. With a variety of talent, I might add. They didn't have Jerry Rice the whole time. They had Dwight Clark for a couple seasons. They didn't have Roger Craig the whole time either. They had Wendell Tyler and Sam Cooper before that.
Right.
So I give Joe Montana a lot of credit for that. He did so many great things on the football field, and I think that he deserves a spot in the top 5. He doesn't deserve the top spot, in my opinion, because he wasn't the greatest athlete, and he did have some lean years.
So those are the credentials these days. You have to be a great athlete.
I do believe that I do believe that if you are a great quarterback, you should be a great athlete.
So RG3, we can just put him at number 1 right now.
No, I don't think he's a great
athlete.
I think that you have to be a great quarterback and a great athlete to be on this list.
You have to have a lot of accolades to even be on that list.
Yes.
But definitely to be higher than number 4. And I think that Montana gave you a lot of those different accolades. You don't agree though, huh?
No, I think that he benefited from being on the team that he was with a lot more than Steve Young or some of the other names on my list. Okay. I think that he benefited a lot more from the system that he was with too.
Okay.
But moving on, we've also got my number 3, which is Johnny Unitas. And here I'm putting him on here because of the innovations that he did. The biggest one of which is the 2-minute drill, which he invented essentially in the 1958 championship game against the Giants in Yankee Stadium.
Right.
And Johnny Unitas, the thing about him was he had a great coach in Weeb Ewbank, but Weeb Ewbank was a good enough coach to just let him do his thing when the chips were down. When you're down, when you need to get a field goal or a touchdown to win the game, or to send it to overtime in the case of the championship game in '58, he decided, look, I'm just going to let Johnny U call the plays. And Johnny Unitas, he had he had two great receivers in Lenny Moore and Raymond Berry, but he could use his secondary.
Too.
Yes, he could use his secondary players and his running game, and he could see the whole field. He could call plays, he could read defenses, and he could audible.
Right.
And on top of that, he could also throw deep.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I can't really add any more to that than what you said. He was an innovator for his time when they really didn't run the ball a lot. I mean, pass the ball a lot,
yeah.
yes. So he did what he had to do for his time, and he had a heck of an arm too. You know, if they had used him more, he probably would have all these records. I really do feel that way.
Well, he had all the records for a long time.
For that period, yeah.
Yes. But I think that you also have to take into account that Lenny Moore was a running back initially.
Right.
And then, you know, Alan Amici was a very great running back to go with it. So I think that when you take all that into account, yes, they should have won more championships, definitely. But also, it's the time period. NFL is also sport with the most parity of good teams. So you can't knock them too much for not winning more championships, in my opinion.
Okay.
And the number two NFL quarterback of all time, in my opinion, and this is going to get a lot of flack. For me, I have to put on Fran Tarkenton, and this goes back to what I said, where you had, like, in my opinion, great quarterbacks should be great athletes. And Fran Tarkenton was an amazing athlete. He could run around, he could scramble, he could chuck the ball downfield, he could cut up a defense with short passes, which was he was in one of the first offenses to really emphasize that under Bud Grant in the 70s. But you also have to take into account what he did early in his career with a bad team under Norm Van Brocklin and a coach who didn't like him. Okay. And how he made that team respectable until they traded him in the early to mid 60s. So the fact that he didn't I know what you're going to say. You're going to say that he didn't win a Super Bowl.
No.
But the thing was that he lost to three teams who were a lot better than the Vikings.
So let me ask you this. Do you consider him an innovator as far as how he played the quarterback position?
I think he was an innovator in the sense that prior to that, scrambling was not something that teams really looked at as a positive attribute or as a major selling point. He made that a major selling point for teams when they were looking for quarterbacks.
But I'm going to tell you why it didn't kind of take on a meaning of its own. It's because he didn't win.
He didn't win
with
the Super Bowl.
With that particular style.
Well, I think that it's also the...
What are we playing for, though, anyway? I mean, you say he didn't win a Super Bowl.
Yeah,
are we playing for that? Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, that's one of the reasons you pad up.
If you don't have you're going up against the Steel Curtain, the no-name defense of the Miami Dolphins, and the Silver and Black attack. He wasn't going to win those games anyway, just by himself. You're going up against those kinds of defenses. No team was probably going to beat them. Well, so, like the years that they were playing
defense
them,
wins games. I do commend you for that, and but you have to be able to score too. But let's move on. We're not going to agree with that one. But.
All right. Well, my number one quarterback here is John Elway. Now, John Elway got to 3 Super Bowls in the 1980s with a mediocre team. Let me just point that out. They were a mediocre team. They did not have a very good running game. They had an okay defense, and they had decent receivers. They didn't have the great receivers that Dan Marino had at the time. But what they did have was John Elway. And John Elway could make something out of nothing like no other quarterback ever. Now, he did win 2 Super Bowls with Terrell Davis and Ed McCaffrey later on in his career. And I think that those are a testament to how great he was when you gave him the pieces.
Yeah, I totally agree.
In my opinion, John Elway was that. And also, he set the record for most comeback victories in a career. So, for me, that is why you cannot go wrong with a man with Captain Comeback, John Elway.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. No arguments there. No arguments there. Now, let me give you my top 5 quarterbacks. Number 5, I have Johnny Unitas. Okay.
All right.
Now, we talked about him being an innovator, you know, he was a decent athlete also. He didn't have to show all those wares based on the offense that they were running, but he was definitely, you know, a great athlete. He could throw the ball really, really well. He was able to see the field, go through his projections. He made a lot of great decisions while he was playing quarterback. You know, for that particular time, when they were running the ball a lot, he stood out. He really did stand out.
Plus, like when you think about it, the Colts of that period were one of the first great passing offenses.
Right, you're right. You're totally right. Now, one thing about him, he was called the Golden Arm. That was his nickname, which is a sweet name, especially for that time when, you know, you're really not passing the ball that much in the NFL. Also, for 52 years, he held the record for most consecutive games with a touchdown pass. I believe Drew Brees broke
I thought
that.
it was Peyton Manning who broke it.
I'm not sure. I thought it was Drew Brees, but that's neither here nor there, though. I mean,
Yes.
He held it for 52 years. That's
He did
incredible.
hold that
Is
record
incredible.
for a while.
Yeah. And another tidbit, he was drafted by the Pittsburgh Steelers.
And he wasn't drafted; he was signed by them, and then he never was drafted.
I'm not done yet.
Okay.
He was drafted, never signed with them. He was released before the season began. Okay, so that's an interesting tidbit. You know, a lot of people didn't know that. So yeah, that's my number 5. Number 4, and you forgot this guy, Dan Marino. Are you kidding me? I mean, I know
Dan Marino wasn't an athlete, though.
And I'm not talking about just being an athlete, though. And that's the difference between my choices and your choices. I don't think you necessarily have to be an athlete to play the position, and we've seen that. You know.
All right.
And Marino was not a great athlete, but he could throw that ball, you know, and he didn't care. He was very courageous when he threw the ball too, you know. And the thing is, he did go to one Super Bowl, but they never had a defense. They never had a defense, nor did they never have a running game at all. And you know, Marino, shame on not Marino, but shame on the ownership for not giving him a better defense, okay, and a running game. You know, you have to win. You got to have a running game to win. But he's broken so many records. He has so many records. I mean, a lot of people call him the number 1 quarterback in the NFL. I disagree, but I have to put him in here in my top 5 just because of all the things that he's done for the league. And he let the league know that it's okay to pass the ball all the time.
Okay, that may be true, but here's the thing: he choked a lot in the playoffs. He only got to 1 Super Bowl, and that was in his 2nd season of his career.
How can you choke when you don't have a running game? I mean, they wanted him to do a whole bunch of things that he was not capable of.
The year after they made the Super Bowl, 1985, they were the number 1 seed, and they lose to the Patriots, who they had beaten twice.
That's his fault then, huh?
And yes, it is his fault because he's their guy. He's the guy, and they beat the Bears. They were the only team to beat the Bears that year.
So we only play offense in football then, huh?
I think that if they get to the Super Bowl that year, they win. They win.
Okay. Well, let me tell some interesting bits about Dan Marino. His 2nd season, he threw for what was a record 48 touchdowns. Now I know that's gotten broken, but that was impressive for his 2nd season. Quick release, powerful arm. We know this. Only went to the Super Bowl 1 time, and guess who they lost to?
The 49ers.
Thank
yes. They lost to the 49ers, and the 49ers just crushed them.
They crushed them. And you know Montana is on my all-time 5 list.
Yes,
That's why
I know.
mentioned San Francisco. So my number 3 is a guy that's still playing today, and which I know is kind of crazy, but you got to put Peyton in here. You got to put Peyton Manning in there. He's my number 3. Peyton Manning, oh my goodness. He runs his team. He doesn't even need a coach. You know, he runs his own particular style of offense. I mean, he you know, talks to the offensive coordinator about it, but they design everything around Peyton, okay? You see Peyton out there, he's doing his snap calls and pointing and doing all this other stuff, and you're like, what the hell is he doing? But when he makes the play, you be like, oh, that's what he's doing. You know, he's very impressive. I mean, you know, it's been a couple playoff games where he kind of blew things, but during the regular season, and for the most part, playoffs, he's a great quarterback. I mean, and he hasn't had tons of talent. You know, I think he made his receivers more than his receivers made him.
Okay.
You know, the Colts, without Peyton Manning, the Colts would have been nothing when he came there. The Colts would have been nothing. You know,
I
he solidified that particular team during those years.
I will disagree with you on the point where you say that he does not need a coach, because if the Colts don't have Tony Dungy, they would never have won that Super Bowl.
Tony Dungy is a defensive coach, though. Let's make that clear.
Yes,
He's more of
I
a
understand
defensive
that,
coach.
but at the same time, I think that he needed a guy like Dungy to also give him the running game as well, and give him the defense that they needed to win that Super Bowl.
Well, we can't give Dungy all the credit. Then we have to give
No, we
ownership
can't.
credit.
But
we have to give the whole Colts staff credit. In terms of getting the right people in there for Peyton. But Peyton is the spoon that stirs the cup. Whether if you want to have coffee in there, vodka, hot chocolate, whatever it is, he was the spoon for that. So you got to give him, and he's still playing after 2 neck surgeries that could have very well ended his career. He came back, played at an all-time high. I mean, come on now. He's my number 3, and he holds a whole bunch of records. But my number 2, and you talked about this guy, John Elway, and I think he was the best athlete by far out of this list to play the quarterback position. Elway, he won 2 rings, like you said. Now he made it to 5 Super Bowls total.
yes,
He lost 3 of those, which is
I don't think those were his fault.
They weren't his fault, but they're on his record. That's
Yeah.
why I couldn't put him at number 1. But this guy is an awesome talent. He was a baseball player. Actually, he got drafted out of high school in 1979 to a baseball team. I think it was Kansas City.
Yeah, but he played in the Yankees system.
He did. So, this goes back to him being an athlete. But at quarterback, it was nothing this guy couldn't do. It wasn't a throw that he couldn't throw. Fearless, too. I mean, he could run, but that wasn't the design of the offense, but he could get out of trouble, okay? He was great quarterback. He would have been my number 1 if it hadn't been for those 3 Super Bowl bloopers, I'll say. But he played a better team, but still, he's not my number 1.
Well, like I said, he didn't have the weapons around him when he made those first 3 Super Bowls. Hell, you can even say they weren't even the best team in the AFC for at least one of those years when they beat the Browns in that comeback victory.
Right.
I mean, he had to will them to that game, to that Super Bowl.
Oh yeah, and that's one of my favorite games too.
The drive, the 98-yard drive.
Yes. All right, and my last but not least, my number 1 pick is Joe Montana.
Okay.
Guess what college he went to?
Oh, I already know, but
and that's not why I chose him though. But I just wanted to throw that out there. He went to the University of Notre Dame. So nicknames: Joe Cool, the comeback kid. Okay, he's had a lot of comeback victories also.
Not as many as Elway though.
I know, but he had them when they counted though too. You know what I mean?
Yes.
In the Super Bowl, he did not throw. He has never thrown an interception in any of the Super Bowls that he's been in. Been in 4 of them. That's quite impressive. Very impressive to me. He's never lost a Super Bowl. Okay, and what you were saying about he dumped and saw his receivers, the running backs, and whomever.
Yes, he
did
use
that.
the screen
He did
game
that
a
well.
lot.
Yes, it didn't hurt that he had Jerry Rice too. But
Or
I think
Roger Craig.
or Roger Craig. They had a nice running game, but I think that they all needed each other. And he loved his coach. He loved Bill Walsh. They made something happen, and they had a good chemistry. But he had good chemistry with everybody. Especially the people on offense. But I think at certain times he could get you that play. That's why he's my number 1. Not the best athlete, but he was not going to jack off a play. And by that I mean he was not going to mess a play up. He was going to make that play happen, and you were going to win that game. You were going to win that Super Bowl when it counted.
Now, I believe that the Super Bowls are a big reason why he's on my top 5. Now, why he's not number 1 for me is because, those years in between, when they first got Jerry Rice and, from 85 through 87.
Okay.
Now, granted, some of those seasons, they were not the best team. I will give you that. But I think that, he just didn't look like Joe Cool in those years. He did not.
Well, it's
play
hard to look like Joe Cool when you're running for your life.
Yeah. But he
because
just,
of the offensive line not blocking for you. I mean,
but like he just did not seem to have the tools. And like I give also Steve Young credit for lighting the fire. Like he felt like he needed Steve Young to light the fire behind him to play better.
Yeah, I agree with
late
that.
in his career.
That helps him. Yes, yes. But I still think, you know, when it was time to win that game, Joe was going to win that game. Okay, so that's my number one pick. If you guys have any comments or anything, you can get back to us at fourthkey.com.
Or if you don't like what we said and you have a top 5 of your own to put to our attention.
Yes. Get at us. That concludes this episode. Do you want to say any last remarks?
Our next episode is going to be top 5 rap albums, and me and Dre are going to have a wide difference in opinion on that.
Oh yeah, definitely. I seen his list and it's not good, but we will talk about that.
I don't know about that.
So until then, guys, this is Opinions Are Life. Again, my name is Andre Miller.
Charles Clinton. See you next time.